All right. Welcome, everyone. I will call to order the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal session for June 13th, 2024. It is 10:02 in the morning. And I will go ahead and lead us all in the flag salute. If you could stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we have a very packed and very lengthy agenda today, so appreciate your patience. And we will try and move through it as quickly as we can. Item C, Commissioners, is our calendar session. Is there anything to add to the calendar? I know we have AOC meetings on Monday and Tuesday in Salem. I believe they're also virtually. And then on Wednesday, 6/19, Commissioners have designated Juneteenth as a county holiday. So the county will be closed. Offices will be closed on Wednesday. Is there anything else to add that we missed?
No, but I'll be adding some stuff come Monday.
For the following?
Yeah, for next Friday,
27th.
21st.
Is that the 21st?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic that is scheduled for a public hearing today. Excuse me. So if you have any public comment on anything that is not on the agenda, not part of our public hearings, now's the time to come forward. And if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Okay. Seeing and hearing none, I don't believe we've received any written comments as well. Item E is department updates. There's nothing today. Item F is our work session. Nothing on work session today. Item G is our consent agenda. And there's quite a few surplus property or sales items. The sheriff is here today, but I did ask him beforehand about the vehicles and how we replace those, how we integrate those into our budget, because there's quite a few of them with loss due to accidents. And so those are covered by a variety of things: insurance, our self-insurance fund, vehicle replacement fund. And as you know from going over the budgets, the sheriff's department does put money into the vehicle replacement fund every month for this purpose. So 2 of those 3 vehicles on this list have already been replaced. And there shouldn't be any type of significant impact budgetary wise. So that was my question on those.
I have questions and I'd like to finish my conversation. If
Sheriff,
the
do you want
sheriff
to
could
come
come
up?
up.
Good, I'm glad I'm not the only one with
Yeah.
questions.
So my biggest question was on the last one. And just to verify, I emailed Dave this morning just to make sure there's no major mechanical issues with it. But my biggest question is, well, if it seems like our fleet is dwindling because of excessive wrecks, why would we not at least use this one as a backup or reserve if it's still operational? So we had a little bit of exchange this morning, but not enough time to really discuss it. So if you can just give a little brief background on.
So that third vehicle, the Ford Explorer that's listed, is a patrol car, a patrol SUV. I think it's sitting at 147,000 miles. It is currently being used as a backup. Originally, it was slated to be auctioned so that the funds from the sale of that vehicle would go back into our replacement fund as we continue to replace vehicles as they hit the threshold mileage or years. And due to some of the loss, we did have to pull that vehicle back into service. It's not being used as a patrol car. It's being used as an administrative vehicle, so it's not being driven the high volume of miles that a patrol vehicle does. It's just being used by one of the command staff as their assigned vehicle. So The original intent was to auction it to put the funds towards the replacement of regular patrol vehicles. We have had to pull it back into service. At the time in which we kind of get caught up, the intent would still be to auction that vehicle to put the money back into the replacement fund. But it's currently being driven.
So just to be clear, and when I see it come before us as surplus, I'm assuming it goes immediately to auction. But just because we surplus it, you can still use it as a backup, and then we can decide later when to auction it.
Yeah,
That's-
this action is just giving us the green light that we can surplus it when we're ready
When you're
to
ready.
do that. If we still have a need, we could still have it, but then we don't have to come back before the board to then surplus it, you know?
Okay.
So it's a technicality. We can't list it for auction if the sheriff still has needs for it, and there's no immediate need to put it straight out onto the auction site.
Perfect.
Does the dollar amount matter? Because that would obviously change if we use it for another year.
Well, it's all, no
Okay.
matter what, it'll depreciate out.
Probably at this point, you're probably gonna get under $2,000, right, for it?
Actually,
No.
interestingly, no. I think that the estimate there is
Mhm.
toward the high end. The auction market is real erratic, but even our sedan, our Chargers that have like 160, 170,000 are still bringing like 4,000, 5,000 on auction. There's companies that look specifically for them. They use them for flagging vehicles, and
Yeah.
we've tended to do pretty well when we do end up auctioning them.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm good.
My car is 8 years old and has way more miles than that. Depressing on the value.
Probably not
Okay.
driven the way we do, though.
Yeah.
You never know.
You have more fun in yours, I'm sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will move approval of the consent agenda. Is there further discussion?
None.
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of approval of a purchase order between Yamhill County Youth Services Center, YSC, and Tech 84 Inc. for the purchase of a body scanner in the amount of $181,500 effective July 1st, 2024. And commissioners, as you know, we discussed this with Director Beach during the budget process. This is the body scanner for our juvenile, formerly known as the Juvenile Detention Center. I will move approval. Is there any further comment,
None.
discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I2, consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to intergovernmental agreement number 6554 between Yamhill County and the State of Oregon's Department of Corrections, Board Order 23-378, increasing funding in the amount of $358,631 to assist with implementation of House Bill 4002, ballot measure 110 reform effective upon full execution through June 30th of 2025. This is supplemental funding that came in kind of unexpectedly, but it's meant as gap funding for the impacts of House Bill 4002, specifically for community corrections. So we don't really know what that's going to look like at this point. If individuals are failing out of the deflection program that we are setting up, it could potentially impact Jessica's department. And so her desire is really to just kind of park the money, and we'll wait and see how that goes. And so it's good that we have additional funds to do so. So I will move approval. Is there any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. I3 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County and Legacy Contracting, Inc. for the construction of the Northeast Ribbon Ridge Road Bridge Maintenance Bundle project in the amount of $343,188.95, effective upon notice to proceed through October 30th of 2024. And again, the intent to award was approved on May 23rd, and no protests were filed for this contract. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I4, consideration to authorize Public Works to purchase a 2024 flush truck from Premier Truck Group of Portland in the amount of $314,123. This was in the 2022-23 budget. It was not ordered until January of 2023, and so now it is ready to be accepted. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I5, consideration of approval of amendment number 3 to an agreement between Yamaha County Public Health and the Multnomah Education Service District, MESD, for Medicaid administrative claims processing services, extending the agreement date through June 30th of 2025 and increasing the administrative fee from $56,594 per year to $59,396 per year.
The public health through HHS contracts with the Multnomah Education Service District to do our Medicaid administrative claims. There are a number of participating counties that contract with them, and this is just increasing that amount. And we just basically put in per claim. So I would move approval.
All right, any further questions?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to I6, consideration of approval in the matter of a resolution or potentially board order. We're not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will be both. It's drafted in the form of a resolution. The statute speaks about the county's role in this as acting by resolution under our procedures ordinance. Resolutions are more for proclamations. Our formal actions are board orders, but we're referring to it as both a resolution and a board order.
Okay. So I will just note that in here. So consideration of approval in the matter of a resolution and board order for Yamaha County Board of Commissioners to concur with the inclusion of a public building project in the Dayton Urban Renewal Plan. Do we have Dave Rucklos here today?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
If you want to come on up.
Sure.
Mr. Rucklos is the Economic Development Director of the City of Dayton.
That's me, Dave
Welcome.
Rucklos. Do you need an address? Here, 2695 Mount Ashland Road. Anyway, we're here today to talk about an urban renewal agency developing such for the city of Dayton. I go back to my experience in McMinnville before I took on this role in Dayton. And I sat on the urban renewal board there for 3 years, or committee. And the projects that we were able to fund during the pandemic and beyond were projects that helped save our downtown here in McMinnville. So I saw what urban renewal dollars could do, especially given the lack of dollars available to do a lot of these kind of projects that require serious money. In particular, I think about here, I go to the downtown projects that I did alone, created new facade relief for buildings. They kept businesses open and so forth. So I see what it can achieve. The state of affairs right now, we all know, I mean, it's go for the grant and hope you get it. And unfortunately, in the nature of Dayton at the moment, it's really got a chance to start to grow. And infrastructure is critical to that growth. If we don't have infrastructure, we cannot grow. That includes the UGB swap we did. That includes land adjacent to Dayton. So anyway, that becomes extremely important to me because the grant lottery prize is just that. It's very difficult to get. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but it's not a stable way to approach trying to accommodate growth. Other than that, I brought Elaine Howard with me today. She is our consultant and has probably done now that I know 85% of the urban renewal agencies in the state of Oregon, of which there are well over 90. The latest being, or one of the newest ones being Lafayette. So anyway, that's why we're here. She's here to answer questions and to present anything you might not know about urban renewal.
Welcome, Elaine.
Thank
for
you,
being here.
Elaine Howard,
Welcome.
consultant to the City of Dayton and Dayton Urban Renewal Agency. So we are here for two reasons for the county. One, when a city within a county proposes an urban renewal area, they are required to brief the county commission on that urban renewal area and the maximum indebtedness proposed for that area. So within this area, the maximum indebtedness proposed over an estimated 25-year time frame is $29,400,000. So that amount of money would be spent over that 25-year time frame. It's not available to the Urban Renewal Agency at the front. It's available as those tax increment revenues come in over time. The other reason that we are here is the statute requires that if you include a public building within an urban renewal plan, that that specific public building project has to be approved by 3 of the 4 taxing districts who levy the most amount of taxes within that urban renewal area. For this particular plan, that's the City of Dayton, the Dayton Fire District, and the Dayton School District, and Yamhill County. The 2 public projects, one is definitely under the statutory definition of public project, and that's providing capital improvement assistance to the Dayton Fire District. And the plan proposes to provide them $1 million to do capital improvements at the fire district. That money cannot be used for staffing or for payment of non-capital expenditures, but it may be used for capital expenditures, either in the parking lot, to the building, to a new fire truck, or to fire apparatus that would be considered capital expenditures. The other public project that is being included is for the Dayton School District. In the statutory definition, recreational facilities are not public projects per se under that definition, but we've included that just to be very transparent with everybody that we are looking for partnerships with those 2 taxing jurisdictions and to be able to assist them. The project for the Dayton School District is another $1 million for capital improvements. And at this point, that would be for the recreation field, the sports field, and new
Stadium.
a new stadium for them. So we know that that $1 million doesn't pay for all of that, but it is an attempt to help them also flourish within that urban renewal area. The stadium is within the downtown area of Dayton, so improving that and improving the facilities at the school is important to the overall success of Dayton. So those are the 2 specific things that we need to do, is tell you the maximum indebtedness and to ask for your consideration of a resolution approving the public building projects. If we do not get 3 of the 4 taxing districts to approve that, then the public building projects cannot occur within the plan. So that would specifically be the fire district project. We believe that the school district project still could occur because it isn't precisely under the definition of public buildings within the statute. And I'm happy to go over anything else. I didn't want to take up your time covering information that you didn't want to know, but we are prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you. The school district project, is it on school district property?
It is.
Okay. And why does that not specifically fall into a public project?
I think that's why, I shouldn't say I think, that's why we included it under public project when we brought it forward. And that is because under the statute, it excludes recreation facilities as a public project. It says specifically, public buildings do not include recreation facilities. There's another part of the statute that says public buildings include projects adjacent to a public building. And so those two parts of the statute fight each other a little bit. And so if for some reason we didn't get 3 of the 4 taxing districts to agree on the public building project, we would have to get legal counsel review on whether that school district project can move ahead or not.
Okay. But if the recreational field or stadium improvements were to be paid with a bond, a public bond, it would not be increasing tax revenue over time, correct?
That's correct. It would be a tax increment bond, which is paid through the tax increment proceeds. So not a bond paid for by property owners.
So Christian, are we being asked to approve these separately, or is this a package deal?
The 2 projects, they're combined, it's approval of both.
Okay.
That's the way it's drafted in the.
That's correct. It's approving public building projects. So on the plan itself, the county doesn't have to take a role in saying yes or no to the overall plan. But for the public building projects, they do. If for some reason you want to separate those out, I assume you could separate those out. We have put them together because they're both public building projects and we're looking for approval of both.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes.
For Elaine?
Yes,
Thank
a couple of things. Recently we had some communication with the Sheridan Fire Department, and they have very concerning financial situations looming, and as do many of our fire districts. And I'm looking at the numbers here for the city of Dayton's fire district, and it would net them basically $1 million for a project. But overall, they would lose 3.8 million. And I don't see how that adds up to being something that could be sustainable for already strapped agencies, as we know our districts are. I'm looking at the county's share, which would be almost $8 million of loss. We just went through a budget process, and we're about to go through some more belt tightening during today's procedures. And I guess what it comes down to for me is, if you look at the numbers, I'm looking at Dayton's numbers for the fire department, looking at our numbers for a net loss of almost $8 million. And I feel like if we ask ourselves whether or not each of those taxing districts can take a hit like this, I would have to say the answer is no. So when I look at other, you mentioned, Dave, that you talk about, there are lack of dollars available. We're struggling like never before at the county. I've never seen this in the decade I've been here. And I know that our fire districts are, and there are some that are very close to really having to ask what happens if there's some insolvency. So we don't have answers on how we can fix, for instance, what's going on in Sheridan. And I know that you mentioned there's a chance to start to grow in Dayton, but for the infrastructure. And then I look at all of our 10 cities, and we have those infrastructure constraints because those projects are so expensive. And yet when I look at this, I don't see that this is a responsible way to fund these projects when we have options for the bonds. So in other words, there would be, bonds, levies, something that would ask folks, would these be projects that you would be willing to pay for in increases in bonds? So I have some concerns about this. And I also know that when we have a number of these ongoing, it really does hit our bottom line, and we don't have any other place to get funding from. So this, for me, would be something I couldn't support.
Could I address just one part of that comment? I
Yeah,
understand the philosophical differences on urban renewal, and I understand that there are those differences. just on the impacts, when you, I think, Commissioner Sterrett, you were probably looking at this sheet.
Mhm.
And on this sheet, you can see that the initial impacts are just that 3%. So they're pretty low for every district. So it's just that 3% growth within the area. And there isn't much assessed value in that area now. The rest of those impacts grow dramatically because there is projected growth within the downtown of Dayton. But that projected growth happens if that infrastructure is put in and if the other improvements are there to help support that growth and make that growth happen. So these impacts that we have here are projections of if the city's able to provide that infrastructure to support new development, and that development won't happen overall unless some of these projects are done. So these numbers are inflated over what would happen if urban renewal didn't exist, because you aren't going to get all of that development. You're going to get 3% basically, and if you look at downtown Dayton, 3% on not much, because there really isn't much development there.
The only thing I would say is I'm not really seeing the connection, because if you're talking about an increase in growth, which would obviously make this more sustainable, is that a recreation field at a school and improvements at a fire district, I don't know how that would necessarily directly contribute to that growth that you're looking for. I understand if you were to do downtown improvements, or if you were to do the Dayton Landing, those types of things really could draw.
Right. And those things are in the plan.
And those
Yeah.
are in the plan, and I saw those. But I still feel that there are other avenues to raising the revenue for those two public projects. And this would be something that would really, I look at our extension service, they're hurting. I know the county is, and the fire districts all are. So I do have my concerns about this being the right way to do it.
I also don't think we can say with certainty that there wouldn't be development in Dayton if not for the UR district. I've not seen that played out in other cities in Oregon. I do have a couple of clarifying questions. You said that the plan is an estimated 25-year plan, but in all of my discussions in previous districts, that had to have been sort of an established timeline. Is there a reason why it's estimated versus?
There's no requirement for a time duration in urban renewal plans. There is just when we forecast what that maximum indebtedness might be, we do it based on an estimated time frame. So we provided the Dayton Urban Renewal Agency with two different time frames, a 25-year and a 30-year time frame. They decided to come back to the 25-year time frame because they felt like it was more respectful to the other taxing jurisdictions. The duration provision isn't required in Newburgh, which was a plan that you reviewed. Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue asked them to put in a duration provision into the plan, and that was a voluntary action based on the request from TVF&R. So putting a duration provision into a plan is a voluntary action by City Council.
Thank you.
Okay, so theoretically, if there's no development for 15 years, you could continue this plan without renewal?
That's correct, but you also would see that the impacts on all the taxing districts would be much lower because that development would not have occurred.
Okay. My other question for clarification is the promise that has been made to the fire district and the school district. Those allocations need to be approved by the Urban Renewal Board. Is that correct? So they're not actually guaranteed at the time.
They're not guaranteed. They will be written into the plan and into the report. And I believe we strengthened that language in or looked at strengthening that language in the plan to make sure that it was understood that it was $1 million allocation to the school district and a $1 million allocation to the fire district. And if if it was supported here and you ask us to make that more clear as part of that support, we could certainly do that.
I don't know that it's our place to ask that. I think if I was the fire district or the school district, I would demand that. You know, I feel like I'm in a tough spot. I don't support urban renewal as a development tool in general. We've had this discussion many, many times. We had it with the city of Newburgh, where we actually had property within the zone of the UR district, proposed district. And we asked them to take it to the public for a vote of approval, and they refused. I used to live in Wilsonville. Wilsonville has an urban renewal district that was sucking about $1 million away from TVFNR every single year and continues to. And they just had another urban renewal district on their ballot in May, and the voters rejected it, in part because the cost is directly in services to the taxpaying public. And, you know, the city of Tualatin, I remember being at a town hall in the city of Tualatin, and the mayor stood up, at the time it was Lou Ogden, and the mayor stood up with the Metro councilor and admitted to a packed room of people, taxpayers that were in the room, that the reality of urban renewal districts is that the revenue increases have to service the debt of urban renewal. And the necessary consequence of that is that, you know, they have to cut basic services. And so from a policy standpoint, I've never seen an ROI on an urban renewal district that penciled out. I just have never seen it. And I've sat in front of TVFNR board members who have admitted that they've never seen it. It's why they have heartburn over it. It's probably why they demanded, you know, the time frame on that one in Newburgh. But the new element of public projects is it's counterintuitive to the purpose of urban renewal. Urban renewal is supposed to increase assessed value and the tax revenue that comes from increased assessed value. And you're talking about putting money into properties that do not produce any tax revenue. And so, you know, if I'm the fire department and I'm looking at this saying, well, over 25 years, I'm going to lose almost $4 million, but they're giving me a, you know, consolation prize of $1 million that I can't use on staffing even. Meanwhile, our personnel costs are going up over time. We just increased YCOM dues by 12%. This fire district is getting hit from many different angles. So how are they going to sustain over the next 25 years if urban renewal is taking money off their bottom line? And the same thing with the school district. I don't understand why these projects haven't gone to the public in the form of a bond, because a bond is the more appropriate direct way to ask taxpayers for funding public projects that don't actually increase tax revenue with increased assessed value. So it doesn't seem like a proper fit to me. I know it's allowed in the statute, but it doesn't seem like a proper fit, because essentially what you're doing is asking county taxpayers to forego almost $8 million over 25 years to fund, you know, in part a gift to the Dayton School District, or to rob the fire department of future funds. And that's not really a trade-off that I agree with, unfortunately. Commissioner?
So is there a presumption that in 2028 that something is coming onto line to increase that?
The merchant block buildings that are existing and being reconstructed right now, yeah, that would be what would be coming.
So there is something solid that is going to
Yeah.
increase this.
Definitely.
Okay, not something that we're anticipating
No,
something to
no,
come to
It's
town.
all tied to merchant.
Okay. And has there been feedback from any of the other districts besides the top four? Because even though the top four are the biggest, I'm still seeing big numbers on here, from extension service to soil and water.
No, there's been no
didn't.
reply from anybody else. We haven't pursued and reached out beyond notification.
So, but only the top four have been notified, or has everybody
No,
been
all of them
notified?
have been.
Okay. And nobody's reached out and given comment on it?
And I want to make sure that we are the extension service. I want to make sure that we do have feedback from them directly.
Mhm.
And what's the time frame, Christian? Did you say was the time frame?
Which time frame?
That we need to respond.
So it's 45 days from the time of receipt, which I believe is the end of May
May.
28th.
Yeah.
And your plan is to take this before the city council when?
In August for their
August.
vote.
In
The
school
statute
district,
is relatively new on public buildings, so it's written a little awkwardly in my opinion. Because it says if we don't hear anything from the 3 of the top 4 taxing districts, it's assumed that they agree or concur. So I would think if you're not going to vote for the resolution, and it sounds like you have at least 2 of the 3 not, that you do then want to send something formal back to the City and Urban Renewal Agency saying that you do not concur, so that that will just make that clear. The statute doesn't really provide for what you do if you don't vote for the resolution, so I think some formal action is probably in your best interest.
And would, let's say that is what the board decides, would that notification of the motion and the vote today be enough just to suffice for a formal correspondence? In other words, if you were given that.
On the public buildings part, yes. If you also are in the consultant confer project timeline for the entire plan. So if you have written recommendations on the entire plan, then you should provide those written recommendations, and the city council has to take those under consideration when they review the ordinance.
Thank you.
have you,
You're using the 45 days from the dates in your letter, correct? May 7th?
Yes.
And
that
so,
was
yeah,
the
in the
date.
letter, it suggests responses no later than June 21st.
Okay, so a week. We have a week. Correct?
Yeah.
have you received answers from the school district or the,
Met with the school district the other night, and we have a fire district on June the 8th. Or,
Yeah.
July.
July.
The letter says if we would like to submit written input, please do so by June 21st. So I don't believe there's a requirement, but as you said.
There's not a requirement.
As at least as regards the public buildings, without a response, then it would presume that they're in support,
Right.
but don't you need a formal action?
For the
Yes.
public buildings, we
Yeah.
need the resolution.
Yeah.
Adopted.
Yeah, and if you don't get that, then that isn't presumed to be support.
I would recommend that you, then
Find
if you
something.
don't
I
get
agree.
support, I would recommend that you ask staff to draft a formal letter to the agency saying you do not support the public buildings. Just,
Yeah, I would agree that.
I'm
makes
looking
sense.
out for your interest. Yes.
I would be in favor of whatever we vote to be providing a reasoned letter as to why we do or do not support. Which sounds like it'll have to be on next week's agenda.
I don't know that the letter would need to be approved by the full board, but it certainly could be. And let's see, a week from today would be the 20th. So yeah,
Mhm.
we would have time to bring something back next week and the board could choose to act on it. And then we would get it to the city before the 21st.
Okay. Commissioners, I mean, this is sort of packaged together, but I have heartburn over each one for different reasons. So I'm not sure how we want to tackle that. We want to separate them out.
It's not going to change the way I'm looking at this in terms of a funding mechanism. So I don't know that that's necessary, but I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels.
Commissioner, any thoughts on?
I'm just a little bit concerned because I would, and no offense to the city, but guess I'd want to hear back from, even though they don't have a vote in these other taxing districts, and see what their thoughts and concerns are on it.
So maybe if we don't hear back or you don't hear back from Extension, I know specifically that was an issue during our budget hearings. We could reach out to them and ask them to correspond with us or to CC us on a response to the city. And
That's-
yet-
As far as the extension service, because you're the board of directors, that would be reaching out to Kelly and Richard and
Get
it
their
would
input.
still fall to the board of directors.
No, that's fine, but they're gonna have more information based on their activities that they do, so.
Right.
Right. Good point.
And I mean, there's more soil and water. There's more than that. And obviously, when we had the discussion about the SIP agreement for Hampton, we painstakingly went through these conversations with them to make sure that they knew that that structure was different and they weren't going to lose money overall. When you start stacking all of these urban renewal districts throughout the county, suddenly you've got, soil and water extension and others that are losing significant amounts of money every year over the next however many years.
But it's important to remember that during the SIP agreement, the Soil and Water District was not only made whole, but did considerably better than they would have prior to the SIP. And I think it's an entirely different discussion.
I'm just concerned, and I want to follow up with at least soil and water, because they were one of the first ones with the SIP agreement to have issues for us.
Right.
Sure.
And I was at their meeting on Wednesday and nothing was mentioned of it. Of course, I left at about 9:00, but maybe they discussed it afterwards, but I just want to follow up with them to make sure and just see what their input is on it.
Okay, so we can move this to next week and we're still within the deadline of
Yeah.
what's required.
Yeah, if you want to table the consideration for the resolution order, yes. Next week. In the meantime, based on some additional information, what comes back next week is better.
Mhm.
Excuse me. I'm not available to come back next week. I'm doing a presentation in Florence, Oregon. So if you have specific questions before then about finances or anything like that, it would be helpful to put those in writing so that I can provide those to Mr. Ruckla so he can be ready for any specific questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Given the holiday next Wednesday.
Oh.
Monday, okay.
I'm hearing that the questions may be more directed to the other taxing districts and how they are feeling about this. So I think that's probably going to be mostly commissioner reach out to have those conversations. Okay. Is there anything further for today? Any questions for Dave or Elaine that we want to make sure we get in?
No, thank you for coming.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, so I will get back to it. So for item I6, we are going to move that to the formal agenda for June 20th, 2024. Okay. Item I7 is consideration of approval of a recommendation from Economic Development Competitive Grant Review Committee regarding the Economic Development Competitive Grant Program. And we are joined with our ED Director, Joya Goodrum.
Good morning.
Welcome. Good morning.
Joya.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay.
So I don't know how much you want to get into the details. I do have some concerns over some of the process on this. And since we have such a packed agenda today, I was going to request that we just move it to next week. But is there something that you wanted to present today or have been asked to?
It's in your packet. If there's questions that you have, I do have, the list of all the applicants, if you were interested in seeing that. I don't know what else you might want to look at, other than what was provided in the packet to you.
But the only thing would like a little bit more information on, that would be something we'd need to look at and then come back and discuss with the other applicants, the makeup of the review committee.
Okay.
And then also information on, and this I believe was in the application. One of the questions was, have any of the applicants been recipients of any?
Yes,
So that's
that was
been
one
it.
of the questions,
That was one of the
correct?
questions.
Yes.
I just had a number of questions, and maybe it's an email, maybe it's a meeting to
Okay.
get some of that information before we go further.
That's fine. If you'd like to hold off, we can do that, and I can come back next week. And then I just want to make sure we get the money out before the end of June,
Before the end of June
because it's in the budget for this year.
of this year. Okay.
But I think we can do that.
Question,
Yes.
Ken, if some or all of this money were not to be awarded in this budget year, I know we've held funds year after year. We haven't, in this particular instance, we haven't been awarding these grants. What would happen if we did keep that money, just hypothetically?
So if the funds were not awarded, those unspent funds would carry over into the next fiscal year and would be in that beginning balance. That any unspent funds would carry forward but if you wanted to carry that over and then ensure that we had sufficient appropriation authority to actually spend those funds the next year, we would probably have to make a revision to the fiscal year 25 budget to revise the beginning balance and then have those funds appropriated in an expense line.
So in the past, we haven't appropriated them. We've had the funds, we haven't awarded them, but
We've had them appropriated, we just haven't done awards.
okay. Right.
Correct, and so then that's why it's carried over, and you'll see it if you look at the current fiscal year, the prior fiscal, you'll see that escalating beginning balance each year. It's because in years past, we've awarded CARES Act funds and ARPA funds. We haven't utilized these funds for grant awards, so that has been contributing to an annual beginning balance.
And there's no shelf life of those lottery dollars that we've earmarked for this specific fund.
No, they're in the fund.
Okay.
They're for the county to use.
Okay, thanks.
So it sounds like there wouldn't be a change. We wouldn't need to change anything. If, for instance, we don't come to an agreement by June 30th.
It's kind of a timing thing. So we do have, much like we did this current fiscal year, we have funds appropriated in grant lines that are available. And so what could happen is if you don't do the award and you do it next year and we don't make any changes to the budget, you would still have that set dollar amount that you can't exceed the appropriation. So what it could do is affect the timelines, that if the grant awards are not awarded until the new fiscal year and we use all those appropriated funds that we have in those grant lines, that if we wanted to do the same program next spring, we may lack appropriation authority to do awards.
Gotcha.
So it would kind of affect the timeline going forward unless there was an adjustment made to do the awards like in July and August, and then still have the flexibility that Joya could go out and do the grant solicitations and do grant awards next spring. If that makes sense, it would have that domino effect.
Okay. Okay, well, it sounds like we've got some more follow-up questions on this item. Commissioner Johnston, do you have anything that you
No.
concur with seeing that additional information?
Yeah.
Okay.
More information is always better.
Okay, so do you have what you need from us in terms of follow-up information?
Just to confirm, what I'm hearing is you'd like to see a list, and I can send this to you in an email, of the applicants as well as all of the review committee. Correct? Is there anything else?
We talked about this too, but flagging who has received county funds going
Mhm.
back
Period.
5 years. I mean, there was a whole lot of funds. So
Mhm.
CARES,
CARES,
small
ARPA,
business.
mhm.
Yep. So
And-
anybody,
And then this also in 2019 was the last time, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ken, was the
Right.
last time we had done the Economic Development Competitive Grant.
so going back to 2019, I didn't see it flagged on there. And there's a lot of familiar names. And so I don't
Mhm.
want to assume.
Of course, I can get that to you in an email then,
Okay.
correct? Okay, very good.
Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the one thing, if we're still considering timelines to consider, and if we're talking about potentially carrying these funds forward into the next fiscal year, and if you're wanting to consider a change, we also have to be mindful, because the approved budget, we have limitations that we can't make any change to a fund more than 10%. And so if you're wanting to move and appropriate the full, what's the total amount that we have available?
125, 125,000.
It's within that 10% within that fund that you could make that change, and that would be an action you would take after the budget hearing later today.
So it would be added technically to these
Correct.
changes? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
I'm
Thank you,
going to
Joanne.
stay here because I'm
Yes.
up next again.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Let's see, item I8 is sorry. So we will technically move item I7 to next week, June 20th, 2024. Item I8 is consideration of approval of a contract between Yamhill County and Campfire Columbia to provide summer enrichment programming in the amount of $291,443.89 effective June 24th, 2024 through August 8th of 2025. And if you noted on Joya's memo, there's a few changes, minor changes, changing the dates to align with summer schedules. And then also there's a school, the location is under construction improvements.
Correct. So there won't be at Newbie, there'll be at Memorial. And then next year, Campfire Columbia will work with McMinnville School District for another location for the summer enrichment program. It likely could be Newbie. I'm not sure. At this point, that's up in the air, but this year definitely at Memorial. But there will be a location for them they have said that they would be able to do that.
Okay.
And
Any
the other thing I want to
questions?
point out,
Oh, sure.
excuse me, I'm so sorry, but it does extend the contract from 12 months to 15.
To
And there was-
align with the schedule.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then the last question was, there was no change to the amount of money. It's the same amount of money that you had approved when we met last time.
Okay. Any further questions for Joya?
No, thank you for
Nope.
this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I will move approval of item I8. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate your time.
We'll get this taken care of. Thanks.
Item I9 is consideration of approval of illegal marijuana market enforcement grant, IME 23-13, between Yamhill County and the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission in the amount of $965,460, effective June 13th, 2024 through December 31st of 2025. The sheriff is here in case we have questions, but this is work that we've been doing in partnership with Polk County in the past, and now we have a direct grant to do this work. Commissioners, any questions?
None.
Okay, I will move approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff, for sticking around. Oh, we have another one for you. I-10 is consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to an agreement between Yamhill County and Newburgh Animal Shelter Friends, Board Order 23-294, increasing the base agreement amount to 36,500 and extending the contract period through September 30th of 2024. And this is an extension. The purpose of it is to really get us through our work session that is scheduled in August to discuss the state of dog control in the county and future planning and funding. And that's really the purpose of this extension.
I have a question, Sheriff. My understanding is that Homeward Bound had not signed the contract until after. I thought this was going to be moved to the 20th per an email from Emily.
Correct. Homeward Bound did not get back to us with the signed copy in time for this week. So this is the Newburgh Animal Shelter one. Homeward
Oh,
Bound, you'll
Homeward
see
Bound.
next week.
Got it. Sorry.
Okay. Any further questions?
None.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? Did anybody?
So moved.
So moved, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sheriff.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Okay, so before we jump into our public hearings, we will take a very brief 5-minute break and start off with our public comments on the county budget. All right, welcome back. It is 11:04. And we are starting up under item J, which is our public hearings. And J1 is receipt of public comment on the 2024-25 county budget. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing for public comment on the county budget. Let's see. I do have one individual in person, Doug Bartlett. If you could come forward. And then if you are online to provide comment for this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can get you in the queue. Welcome, Doug.
Morning.
Thank you.
Morning.
You want my name, rank, and serial number?
Just name and address would be great.
If I can remember, that'll be good. Doug Bartlett, mailing PO Box 58, Newburgh, Oregon. Residential 1100 Northeast Meridian, Unit 47,
Great, thank you.
Newburgh, Oregon.
Thank you.
It's been a long time since I've been sitting in this seat. I was here back when Lee Vasquez was the sheriff and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I'm here to comment about the budget. I am not a budget expert, but I have read some of the budget work, et cetera. And my observations today is that you bent over backwards, for instance, in the area of the Dayton application, to be sure that everybody on the taxing districts was heard and very significant input was received from them. And you were being very, very cautious, very, very careful, extremely fair on who all of the players were in this. And what I sense about the budget is that that's not quite the way the budget was made. And so I just have concerns about that very significantly, of taking from rather glibly from Department A to support Department B and et cetera, et cetera. It just smells very much more political than it did what you did this morning. That was a demonstration almost to the extreme on the other end. Secondly, I was wondering if the budget decisions were really based upon anything identifiable as far as best practices. That's a phrase that's been thrown around for decision-making processes for many years, and I think it's a good one. But best practices for, again, taking money from one department, supporting another department, et cetera, under what best practice is that recommended and done? A third comment, we have growing issues of homelessness and drug use. And the very department that was hit the hardest is one upon which we depend significantly to help address those two specific issues in our culture. That doesn't make sense to me. Those two issues are not easy issues. I totally agree with that. There's not a simplistic answer. But they need the best support, the best help from the broadest experienced group to work with them. And the budget didn't seem to represent that to me. Last thing is a question. What I would ask an employee when they made a decision that I didn't think very much of, I asked them, is that your best work? Is that something that you're really proud of, or should I give you a little bit more time to go back and work on that some more? They knew that I did not agree with what they had done or what they were recommending, and I wanted their best. I didn't want slapdash. Because where I was and the people that I was working with, we were working with people's lives. And I wanted them to never forget that. Is that your best effort? Is that the best budget that you can make? Not an acceptable one, but is that the best?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you.
We don't typically respond to public comment, but I do feel compelled to recognize our budget committee. We not only have the three of us painstakingly going over the county budget for upwards of 4 days, but we also have 3 citizen members that give up 3 days of their lives to come in and painstakingly go over every single line item. And these members are taxpayers in the county. They are from the private sector, they're business owners, they pay all of the taxes. And so they get to see how those are being translated into public service from the county perspective. And we had extensive conversations on how we are supposed to shift and prioritize and maximize a very limited pool of county taxpayer dollars. We don't have a long list of options like cities do when it comes to pulling in more tax revenue. It's pretty limited, and we haven't changed our tax rate in over 26 years. And so when we look at different departments, and they're all critical, everyone's critical, but when you're working with a limited pool of funds, you have to make sure that you can shift those around to make sure that everyone's made whole. And when we have massive vacancies in one department, and yet the sheriff's department is equally as critical to some of the services and some of the societal pressures that we are facing, we have to make those tough decisions to make sure that we can fully fund law enforcement that does interact directly with those issues, fully fund assessment and taxation. We don't have that department. We have no tax revenue, right? So we have a long list of priorities that we have to balance. And I'm just really proud of the work that the budget committee did. I think often the hard work that we do in this room is lost in translation when it comes to how the news register reports. There is definitely a political bent, and it is not in favor of this board every single time we make tough decisions. And that's unfortunate because we do a lot of really hard work in this room. And I'm very proud of those citizen members that come in every year.
And to your point, Chair, I think when the only source of information about what goes on in this room is filtered through a very definite and demonstrated bias at both of our newspapers, I think it does a disservice to the actual information that you're getting. I know when folks are concerned about something, oftentimes they will reach out to a commissioner and ask for clarification. And invariably, I'm going to say 99.99% of the time, they'll come away and go, oh, I didn't realize that. I just got this from the newspaper. The other thing I would say, as the liaison to Health and Human Services, some of the concerns that you have, no services were impacted, no services were cut, and it is 0.0049% of a $77 million budget. When we had our sheriff saying, I don't have enough to keep going. When we have our clerk who's saying, how do I conduct elections that the state requires us to conduct? And we are given a finite amount of money. And in the past, we never really had these problems because we were flush. But when we have continuing personnel cost increases because of bargaining agreements with the 5 different unions that we have, and we are struggling to give our employees the very best we can, knowing we have a finite pot of money. And we did that, and we went, I think, above and beyond. And still we're being sort of, the suggestion is that we didn't do due diligence. I know our staff, our administrator, our deputy administrator, chief budget officer, they have worked very hard with our department heads to find ways that they can continue to deliver the services that Yamhill County is known for. And we are known for excellent customer service, and nobody gets turned away. What happens is if they come to us and say, this is our proposed budget, and then we have the input from the citizen budget members who have no political agenda that you perhaps are accusing us of having, they come to it and they look at raw numbers. And raw numbers is all we have to work with. But at the end of the day, no services were cut. So I just hope you come away with a little bit of a different perspective. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you for that.
Just want to add a little background on time frame for this. It's not just our budget committee hearing either. This starts as soon as we set budget in July. This process starts all over again. So it is a constant, always being worked on. It never just slapped together. So I just want to make sure that that's put out there. Thank you.
Okay. Did we have anybody online that raised their hand that it could see under attendees? Okay. Is the attendee column the ones that are showing? Okay. All right, I'm gonna make sure. Okay, if there's no further comment on the item J1, we have to, do I
Yeah,
close the
so
hearing
like,
technically?
yeah.
Okay, so I will close the hearing. And we will
So
look at
the one last step that we need to do, now that the hearing's closed in preparation for budget adoption for next week. As we usually see, I have a list, and sorry, I've been working on this as of up until just walking over here to the meeting. We do have some last minute changes that we do need to make. Some departments have requested some adjustments and in order to get these incorporated into the final adopted budget. And I provided a summary down below. I just want to highlight that none of the requested increases in expenditures within a budgetary fund exceed 10%. And there may be some smaller housekeeping items that we may find when we're going through anytime we make some changes like this, sometimes we have to balance with other funds. If you like, I can run through the list and then we can talk about economic development here really quickly. But to summarize it, the first one, Department of Community Justice, the juvenile detention. I know the name changed, but old habits are hard to break. But the manager requested an adjustment because they're currently working on some projects with their intercom and control system. So they're looking at moving funds out of their ending balance and into an expense line for that project, a total of $127,550. The next one is has an impact. It's a discretionary allocation of increasing the discretionary allocation to 911 dispatch for $65,396. YCOM approved their budget this week. And a couple of weeks ago, they approved, the YCOM executive committee approved a dues increase, and we basically budget exactly what the county's dues are for the year. And so I need to increase that amount to make sure we have sufficient funds to pay our YCOM dues. And then the items under the sheriff, there's quite a few listed here. But it's really related to 3 different projects. The first one is we need to build a placeholder into the patrol budget of $140,000, and that's a placeholder for the HB 4002 grant application that Sheriff's Office is currently working on. And so we'll also have corresponding expense. We're just gonna, for now, we're putting it in miscellaneous, but the intent, this is actually gonna be personnel. It's going to be proposing to hire to pay for a position to coordinate the program in the sheriff's office. But for right now, and because again, we just need the expenditure authority built into the budget. That's why I'm proposing to put it in that miscellaneous line. The next one, it's, the sheriff called me. They're also applying for, I'm not sure what the acronym BJA stands for, but it's a grant program. And it's for $7,800, $7,875. It's revenue and expense, and that's for replacing, ballistic vests. And then the last item, this was a real last minute for the sheriff's office, was an additional needing to $25,000 of potential revenue coming in from the Oregon Sheriff's Association for a pilot program grant for a jail project. And so we felt it necessary to add the $25,000 revenue, and then we'll have that expense. So if they do, there's still a lot of discussions being had, but it looks highly likely that our jail is going to be one of a few that might be selected for this pilot program. And the sheriff can give more details. Again, we're just trying to make sure we have appropriation authority within the budget. So should we get the grants, that they can move forward with the project, but more information to come on the actual grant itself. And then the last item is an HHS request. We're looking at reducing the ending balance and moving $500,000 of expense. And that's specifically associated to the improvements that we're making for the public health relocation. So this is just reducing their ending balance and moving that into a capital line. And so that's the summary I prepared. The last item is on here is the economic development that we just had a discussion earlier in the meeting. I didn't include this on the list. We currently have, let me switch gears here, make sure I have the actual numbers in front of me. So we currently have $200,000 budgeted to facilitate the same grant program for the next fiscal year. And I think there's two options. Because I do have concerns that even if in hindsight kind of, or looking at it now, I would have concerns about actually getting the funds out the door before the end of this fiscal year. Even if the awards were made today, because we need to get agreements in place. A lot of times those agreements have to come back before the board before we can actually cut checks. And so I really think, I think we're going to need to take a closer look at the timelines on how we roll that program out. So I don't know if we necessarily need to make changes unless the board really wants to move forward with grant awards that the funds are released in July for this current fiscal year, or the solicitation that was done this current fiscal year, and then turn around and do it again in December or January. If you want to do two different grant awards, we would have to adjust the appropriation authority to cover both, or we have sufficient appropriation authority to take care of these grant awards, and then we could look at the timing that maybe we start doing the solicitation maybe in July or August for these types of grant awards. So then that way we're not running up against the end of the fiscal year, if that makes sense. So I don't have that on the list. It's really what the board would like to do. We can incorporate the changes and add $125,000 to the beginning balance of FY25 for Fund 26, and then add that 125 in expense authority in order to do the grant awards for these grants, and then still have the 200,000 for a second round of grant awards to occur early in the next calendar year.
So that 125 is in addition to the 200, or is that included in the 200?
We would have to, if you want to do both in the next fiscal year, we would have to add the 125 to the 200. So that would change the total, the funds being available to 325.
Okay.
Which it can be done.
What do you think? Keep options open?
Yes.
Mhm.
So with the most flexibility, I'd probably recommend
I
then
would do
adding
that.
$125,000 to the
Yes.
beginning balance and $125,000 to the expense lines.
Great, yes, thank you.
I got a question about the 140K grant for the sheriff. That doesn't affect the 480-ish that's coming in from the state.
That's part of it. My question is, where's the rest of it?
It's part of it, but you might remember that Brad had already built in some placeholders into his budget. The sheriff's office was the one because they were still flushing out the plan on who was going to apply, where the position was going to reside, so they've moved a lot further in their planning, and this is really led by Brad
Okay.
and the sheriff.
So this is not above and beyond the fort. We're not going after extra funds.
It's
above
part
and-
of it.
Okay,
It's just making sure that we have that full award appropriated in each of the funds where it's going to land.
got it. Thank you.
Brad only budgeted his portion, which was a deputy DA. And yeah,
Yeah, and I wasn't looking at, I always just knew the total number and I just want to make sure it all lined back up again. So,
Correct.
I
okay.
don't think the number is going to change, the 485, but just to recap, what did he put in his budget?
as for the sheriff,
No, the
Or-
DA.
the DA.
I want to make sure it totals up to 45, and then I have concerns about how, because this comes online in September 1st,
Mhm.
and we won't get money until October.
Right.
So there's going to be a gap where,
Well, which would mean that we would underspend and it would get carried over. This is building in this is just building in the appropriation authority. And I do think that they do have, because throughout a budget year, you have unanticipated vacancy savings, unanticipated savings and other lines that you can make up that difference as far as expenditure authority.
okay,
So I don't have any concerns that we're going to be able to cover the full amount except for the sheriff needs this amount because we know the sheriff's budget is one of them that we've had to budget very tightly. So yeah, I think he's going to need this expenditure authority.
okay,
And then if we get anything more, or if we spend less, again, we would adapt to, because these are projections. So, and subject to grant awards and funding being available and then filling the position, there's a lot of what ifs that are going to be built into this. This is just simply a placeholder to make sure he can spend the money next year.
There's no timeline on the 4002 funds, are there?
I don't know all the details on the grants.
You know,
no, I mean, I think technically they're giving us 12 months to show success, whatever that looks like per
Right.
county.
Mhm.
But I guess my concern was, if we'll know in July whether or not we get them,
Mhm.
but we're going to get funds. So if we go out with the solicitation and we hire someone in August so that they can onboard and be ready for September 1st,
Mhm.
and we're not getting money till October, that we have room to
Mhm.
cover that person.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So we've got some direction on the economic development grants. Was there anything else?
And if the board is okay with these revisions as we've discussed, if you can make a motion to approve it and then we'll take it to the next steps.
What's the next step?
Well, if this is approved, then the next step is then I start building the resolution, the appropriation schedule and getting everything ready for budget adoption next Thursday.
Next week, yeah. Okay.
But I do need formal action on these changes because we're modifying the approved budget.
I would move approval of the proposed budget changes as amended and added to for the proposed final budget version 40.
Is that sufficient for motion?
That works.
All right, any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes and get that wrapped up for next week. All right. Anything else on the budget before we move on? Okay. All right, item J2, our second public hearing is docket number M02 -24 SDR -02 -24, a site design review for the construction and operation of a new wireless communication facility consisting of a 125-foot monopole tower with associated equipment cabinets, emergency diesel generator and cabling. The applicant is Mike Unger, representative for ACOM Consulting for Verizon Wireless. It's tax lot 4408-00201, and this was continued. This is continued from May 9th of 2024 at the point of staff recommendation. So I'll go ahead and open the hearing, and we will pick up at staff recommendation.
Staff finds that the applicant has reasonably demonstrated that the request adequately addresses the applicable review criteria. Staff recommends approval of the applicant's proposed cell phone tower with the conditions of approval listed in the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I will close the hearing and open it up for deliberations. Commissioners, you received the lengthy sort of back and forth of further testimony, I suppose it is. Okay. Any thoughts? Anybody want to open up discussion?
My two biggest things, one was that the eyesore that was going to be, I'm a little bit disappointed that there wasn't another place on that farm, because it seems by aerial footage that they could, but maybe utility wise, it doesn't make sense. But in the end, it seems like they're more than willing to maybe make it a little more camouflage by making it a tree version of a tower. The other thing was, my understanding was it was a new driveway going into the tower site, and I guess it's an existing driveway. What I'd still like to see, and I don't know if this is why it's an existing driveway, are they proposing now to go back to the main driveway of the farm and follow west side to this site, or is it still coming in off that corner?
Still coming in off that corner.
So there is an existing driveway there already on, okay.
One thing, the only concern for me was the alternative site consideration, and it was presented that there was no consideration, but looking at the information and some of the rebuttal, it's not as if the property owners didn't consider alternative locations. It was pretty well outlined. It seemed easy to propose, but ultimately it seemed that they did do their due diligence. That was my only sticking point.
I didn't see in there if they were going to do like green slots around for their chain link fence.
That is in the proposal.
It is, okay.
Can you clarify what your concern was about the driveway access?
Driveway, I thought it was a new driveway access, which they would have to get approval from probably ODOT, or is that a county road there? So probably still takes approval from ODOT to get that done. But it's an existing one anyway, so it doesn't matter. My assumption was a brand new driveway, which would have been concerning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we left off last time, we, as a board, encouraged cooperation and, more camaraderie perhaps as neighbors. This is a significant addition to the area. And, didn't necessarily play out in the way that I had hoped for. However, I did see that the Bernards did respond. They were responsive, and they made several attempts to, examine the property further for other locations to cite this. I want to be careful that we don't get, we don't cross the line where we're telling property owners, in this case, farmers, that, the aerial view of your farm shows this might be a good place and this might be a good place, but we're discounting the fact that they might use those spots for farming activities. Doesn't necessarily mean there needs to be a crop growing on that space, but you know very well that those locations can be used for different things throughout the year. So I just want to be careful that we're not pushing.
No,
that.
I mean, I feel comfortable about it because there was no conversation about it. Now they've readdressed it. And so here we are. Obviously, it's been addressed and we're not being pushy about it. Be like, no, you need to relocate it to their barnyard. And I totally am against, taking up any farmable or good farmable ground. But if they could somehow locate that driveway skirting the ditch without getting into, farm ground around that red barn, I don't know how much dead area there is there. It would be ideal. The other thing that was a concern was the lighting.
Right.
And I don't know that as they were going back and forth, it seemed that we're talking about lighting 24 hours. And I just want to make sure that the lights literally would only come on if somebody was to come to that site and be there working, and otherwise the lights are off. And I just want to be very clear about that, because that would be kind of annoying. And no other reason for a light to be running out there if nobody's there.
And there's no safety issues with that we know of.
But no time frame set for it, like it can't run at night, or it can only be on when somebody's present, or.
Correct. We don't have a condition like that
Okay.
on the proposal.
Okay. I'm talking about maintenance lights, like if they're just on as almost a security light. I've seen shielded lights and they're still pretty bright.
Okay. Well, I, obviously appreciate the fact that the applicants did explore other options. I think that to offer what is called I didn't know what the name of it was. Monopine. It has a name, the stealth monopine, to the tune of additional, $60,000 is significant. Are there conditions with the driveway that you're seeking to?
No, because it's an existing one.
Okay,
I'm okay.
but lighting maybe.
I could see where there might be gray area with the lighting, and it might become an issue later on down the road, unless there's a specific time put to it. I know there's already stipulations with it shielded, but I've seen shielded lights before, and at night driving by, I can see where they might be a little annoying to either drivers driving by or even a neighbor that's across the road.
So Ken, what is the ability to sort of compound what one of the conditions is regarding lighting?
Well, I think we could
put a condition on the lighting. That's in addition to the one we have. My concern is I didn't realize this was a concern, so haven't had a chance to have the applicant respond on something like that. Also, right now, the farm could put up a halogen light that's unshielded, and there's no regulation on lighting out in the county. And so, you know, we felt like, well, as long as it's shielded and as long as it's not going onto adjacent parcels or onto roads, that would be suitable and actually more than we would require the farmer to do on their own farming operation. So we feel like that condition right now at least is one that the applicant did not object to and seems reasonable for the situation.
So halogen directed at perhaps a field while you're working at night, something like that would be permitted. Okay. I want to clarify that the staff recommendation does not include the monopine, correct?
Yeah, we talked about that fairly extensively, and I do have language you could put on if you want to have the monopine. We thought, though, if we put down the condition that it'd be the stealth monopine, and then somehow they keep with discussion and come up with something else that's satisfactory to the neighbors and the applicant and the owner of the property, then we have to come back and change that. They've offered it. I believe they'll end up doing it. If you want to put it down as a condition, fine. Just realize if they come up with something different in the future, we'll have to probably come back and then modify the condition to whatever the new design is, if it's substantially different. And if I can just read, the condition number 1 would just be modified to say the development shall substantially conform to the site map submitted with this application. And then it would have added, the cell tower shall be a stealth monopine facility as presented in the record by the applicant.
Commissioner's thoughts on adding that? I'm not familiar with what other designs would be available, so I'm
Yeah.
not sure I can.
I wouldn't mind adding that in there because I don't mind it coming back to us if it needed to be changed later anyway, so.
Okay, any other thoughts, questions? Do I have a motion?
I would move to uphold the planning director's recommendation to approve the application for the construction and operation of a wireless communications facility on tax lot 4408-0021. With the change in conditions of approval.
Specifically, that the cell tower shall have a stealth monopine design as stated by the applicant. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Let the record show unanimously. We do need to schedule findings.
Are they represented?
Yes.
They're not here, are they?
Mike Connors is
Oh, okay.
online, and so if we could ask for Mike Connors to be promoted to a panelist and maybe see if he would, yeah, if Mr. Connors is there, if he would.
Mike, we want to give you as the applicant the first opportunity to write out the findings if you so desire. And if so, how much time would you need?
Thank you, commissioners. Can you hear me? It's Mike Connors.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Yes, I would be happy, we would be happy to prepare some supplemental findings for your review and adoption. It's pretty common to do that. And I could have it prepared, I believe you meet every other week. I could have it prepared for your, I'm sorry?
We meet every week. How is a couple weeks? How about the 27th?
Yep, that will work, no problem. So I can prepare those findings in time for you to be able to review them at your June 27th hearing.
If you need more time, totally fine. Just, I figured since the 4th is the week after that, we could try for the 27th. But if you need more time, absolutely just let us know.
I appreciate that. But no, 2 weeks should be sufficient.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will schedule findings for June 27th. All right. Let's see, that concludes our public hearings today. It will bring us out of that section into announcements. Let's see, I've got a few quick ones. I just wanted to congratulate Sergeants Stoneberg and McMahon and Deputy Blankenbaker. They were sworn in yesterday afternoon and really appreciate their service to the county. All of their families were here and it was wonderful to watch that. A lot of great comments, not just about our sheriff, but about the county and the agency as a whole and how the county commissioners support our sheriff's department. Lots of positivity there. So that was good to hear. We had a follow-up meeting on House Bill 4002 this week with all of the usual suspects, the DA and Director Manfrin and Director Beach and the sheriff and all of the police chiefs from throughout the county. And we're looking to define what success would look like for us. And so we walked through some steps that we all came to consensus on as to how we were going to roll this out and what success would look like. And that will be included in the application that will go to the state. And so that's due, I believe, by July 1st. And so I've asked that the application be shared so that you can read it and you can. I'm getting smiles. But if you want to read it and actually see what we are submitting for and the details about what we've discussed, because it's been a lot and I haven't, I've given you brief updates. So I am participating in what is called the Rail Advisory Committee. This is not a committee that was put together by the legislature. It's more of a voluntary committee, but it does involve several counties, several cities in Polk, Yamhill, Marion County. I can't remember if there were others. But basically the discussion started as should we extend the west, the extension from Wilsonville to Salem. There were a lot of lobbyists in the room who would love to see the extension of west from Wilsonville to Salem. I think there was some pushback though about taxpayer funding for this. And ultimately at the end of it, several were asking for, well, can we support different types of light rail through different routes in the future instead of focusing simply on the west extension. So that was another red flag towards the end of it, that now the scope of this group is extending into potential rail lines that could come through Yamhill County. So I'm glad we have a seat at the table because that's concerning that they would pivot that quickly in the first meeting. So I will continue to follow up on that. And I think that was it for my announcements.
I got nothing.
Yeah. Housing Authority, we had a meeting and basically the Stratus Village project is going to commence construction in the next few weeks. And so we're looking forward to that. It's really going to be a game changer for affordable housing units, and it's quite a nice project. Also wanted to give an update on the whole shelter situation in Newburgh. Last week, we had Kate Stokes from the Community Wellness Collective come and talk about some of the concerns they had over the fact that the YCAP Newburgh shelter was not open, and they were running out of the funding that the county provided to keep the interim shelter going until YCAP had opened theirs. There was no definitive date for that to happen. So after that meeting, YCAP sent a letter to the shelter, Community Wellness Collective, letting them know that they were going to open their shelter. I feel like they kind of felt the heat on that from a public perspective, and they were going to open their navigation center shelter, the newly remodeled one, starting the day after that. So that would be this Monday. They were going to open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. There was no information on the number of beds available, and they would be getting referrals. They would not be open on the weekends, and the barriers are significant to the population that have been staying at the Wellness Collective Northside Shelter. You had to have a referral process. You had to have an email contact. You had to apply through the YCAP website, and you could not use someone else's email address or phone number. So for the homeless population that we're dealing with, the majority of them at the shelter, it was really very cumbersome and almost designed as an elite concierge type of experience. If you could jump through all these hoops, but the fact of the matter is, if you can jump through all these hoops, typically you wouldn't be staying there. And out of the 15 that the Wellness Collective recommended and referred, out of the 18, 15 were denied. So I have concerns about this. I met with the police chief and asked him what his concerns were about the fact that on the 30th, this is basically going to take an enormous number of people. We're upwards of 35. And where will they go? The city has decided on the 30th, they've got another plan, which is to have a campground along 219. It's basically going to be from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. It's going to have one porta potty, and it's going to be along the highway. This is really not very user-friendly, and we're hoping that the folks who really need the services, like let's say a family or an elderly person, working with Northwest Seniors, working on case management, working with Health and Human Services, really has been hands-on to try to find out if any of the people in there, some of them are our clients, any of them can be referred to other services. And so I feel very confident that our HHS department and our HHS director has been really working hard to try to mitigate this situation. But I think ultimately it falls on YCAP, who has not really made this very user-friendly for the folks who need the help. Unfortunately, their funding is going to run out, and YCAP has really sort of quasi officially, opened their shelter, but it's not really accessible or available.
So YCAP is open now?
So they opened after the meeting last week. They sent an email to the Wellness Collective saying that they would open this past Monday, but it would be limited. It would be 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, no weekends. And the services that are provided at Northside now are breakfasts and lunches and transportation and some of the counseling and some of the psychiatric, psychological type of therapy and a physician who visits there. So there's an awful lot of case management going on there. Those will not be provided based on what we know. Very, very sketchy information.
I guess I'm just kind of surprised that they kept pushing off the opening, and we were hearing it wouldn't be until the fall for whatever reasons. And then they just literally over the weekend opened it. Is that accurate?
It is.
But it's only nighttime. There's no daytime services.
No, and that isn't the piece I think that's concerning. I think the piece that's concerning is that on the weekends, where do those sheltered people go? The other thing is even more concerning is it seems pretty cumbersome to try to even get in there based on what the requirements are. So it really isn't serving the same population. It's serving more of a population that might need a place to stay, but there perhaps a lot fewer needs, a lot higher acuity are going to be at the North Side shelter. And that's the population that everybody's concerned about. Where do they go? So I don't think anything's been fixed. I don't know whether or not it was a PR move, but it certainly isn't going to mitigate the concerns we have about that population. A lot of them really are not going to be easy to house. That's the update.
Do we know if individuals are actually staying there overnight?
We don't know. We know that they have officially opened, but as I said, those referrals that came from the Wellness Collective, 15 out of the 18, I was told were not accepted. So they are staying at Northside now because Northside is still open.
Okay.
But they're running out of money.
And time.
And time.
Okay. It like the more time that goes by, the more confusing this
Yeah.
becomes.
Agreed.
I feel like. Okay. Any further announcements? You said you didn't have anything. I do want to wish all of the fathers, I think everyone in this room is a father. So happy Father's Day this weekend. And thank you for the very important role that you play in our kids' lives and your kids' lives. It's big job, important job. So is there anything else for the good of the order? Before we adjourn? Nope. All right. I will adjourn the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal session for June 13th, 2024.